Imagine a massive, rapid transformation of an entire nation's food production, a shift so monumental it altered daily life for millions. This period in Soviet history brought about changes that were both swift and brutally effective, impacting the very sustenance of its people. So, how exactly did this agricultural revolution, known as collectivization, influence the Soviet food supply? Collectivization profoundly and negatively affected the Soviet food supply, leading to severe shortages, widespread famine, and the deaths of millions, particularly in the early 1930s. Far from boosting agricultural output initially, it caused a catastrophic decline in food availability across the Soviet Union. The primary reason for this devastation was the forced amalgamation of individual peasant farms into large, state-controlled collective farms, or kolkhozes. Peasants, who had traditionally farmed their own small plots, were stripped of their land, livestock, and tools. This removed their personal incentive to produce surplus food. Instead, they worked for the state, often under coercive conditions, with a significant portion of their harvest going to state quotas rather than their own consumption or local markets. Furthermore, the process of collectivization involved intense resistance from the peasantry. Many farmers, particularly the more prosperous ones labeled as kulaks, actively resisted by slaughtering their livestock rather than handing them over to the collective. This massive culling from animals drastically reduced the available meat, dairy, and draft power for farming, further crippling agricultural capacity. The state's focus shifted from ensuring basic food security to extracting grain to fund rapid industrialization. This meant that even when harvests were adequate, the state often procured a disproportionately large amount of grain, leaving collective farms and regions with insufficient food. This policy, coupled with poor management, lack of agricultural expertise on the collective farms, and sometimes adverse weather, created a perfect storm for famine. One of the most devastating outcomes was the Holodomor, a man-made famine in Ukraine that resulted in millions of deaths. For the Soviet people, this meant enduring chronic food shortages, rationing, and a constant struggle for sustenance, especially in urban areas and during periods of high grain procurement. The state became the sole allocator of food, using it as a tool of control and a means to prioritize industrial workers over the general populace. The long-term effects included a generation of farmers who were less independent and less motivated, impacting agricultural productivity for decades. Understanding collectivization's impact reveals a critical lesson in economic planning and human cost. It underscores how centrally planned agricultural systems, when implemented with coercive methods and a disregard for individual incentives and human life, can undermine food security and lead to widespread suffering, rather than the intended abundance.